Rise of the Ronin really surprised me. My expectations were low going into this due to seeing mixed reviews all over the place back in March when this game released, and I did not like Team Ninja's Wo Long Fallen Dynasty that came out last year. So I just naturally didn't really care much about Rise of the Ronin. It came out the same time as Dragon's Dogma 2, and if you're familiar with my channel, you'd know I chose to review that game instead. However, I am a sucker for samurai anything, and a samurai video game is definitely up my alley. Ghost of Tsushima is my immediate pickup recommendation to all new PlayStation owners, and is my personal favorite game on the platform. Now we have another samurai exclusive in the form of Rise of the Ronin. The question is it worth it? Graphics. The graphics in Rise of the Ronin are not up to modern standards, especially when you have games like Ratchet & Clank, Rift Apart, and Final Fantasy XVI on this console. If you had a problem with Starfield's loading screens, then be prepared to be bombarded with a lot of loads in this game, and they're all black screens with nothing on them. However, I'm not going to hop on the bandwagon of calling it a PS3 game. I've been playing a lot of 7th generation games for this channel, and nothing really looks like Rise of the Ronin. I just think people hear one really extreme criticism and they just run with it. However, this does look like a standard game that could run on a PS4 or Xbox One, especially in the earlier years. Team Ninja has never really been the one to woo me with their graphics, or at least I just haven't really found them super impressive. They've always been just pretty standard, but now that games cost $70, people are going to want better visuals, and I can understand that. Even with the PS5 focusing visuals, there was just a lot left to be desired in some areas. This isn't going to ruin your experience. These visuals are fine, but don't go expecting anything to make you go, wow, consistently. It's just not going to happen. The gameplay. This is the best part of the game. I would hope so. It's a video game. A lot of returning players to a Team Ninja game may expect this to be another attempt at another Souls-like game a la Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and Sekiro, because their last two game franchises, Nioh and Wo Long, have both kind of fallen under that genre. And while there's definitely some Sekiro inspirations to be found here, it actually plays a lot more like the Assassin's Creed RPGs with a dash of Far Cry. You have a fair amount of options while playing this game. You can master weapons, build your character around certain skills, and armors sometimes come with special little perks and set bonuses. You'll get boosts that say, this does 12.5% more damage, which could come from your skills or your gear, and honestly, it means nothing to me. I'd rather have a more defined stat boost than just seeing decimals and percentages thrown around everywhere. Combat is where you're going to have a lot of fun because slicing and dicing your way through enemies is extremely entertaining, and since there's an actual difficulty setting here, you can just make this game as hard or as casual as you want it to be. I found parrying really fun, and it's what I did at most times during my playthrough during combat. There's dodging and blocking, of course, but parrying is kind of what makes it all really entertaining. But sometimes parrying can be inconsistent because enemy attacks aren't really well choreographed, or maybe you'll be hitting the parry button and it just doesn't seem to register properly, and that could be worked on, and hopefully they can work on this in a future patch, because I think the combat is actually pretty excellent, but it is held back by these inconsistencies. In-game activities, aside from the main quest line, includes dozens of side quests, taking enemy camps, companion missions, and a handful of random encounters, and cat chasing. I ignored that last part. That's like Assassin's Creed 2 feathers all over again, and I'm not doing that. I should mention, for people who do care about this, there are some stealth mechanics in the game They're just not really super deep, and they don't really do anything more special than any other Assassin's Creed game it tries to copy. There's also a glider that unlocks early, and that can be really convenient when you just kind of need to navigate cities quickly. There's also a very versatile grappling hook that can be used in combat and can also be used to traverse tall buildings and get on top of towers. There's a whole lot of repeated bosses in this game, and you're going to fight them over and over again. Since this game takes place during a historical time in Japan, it hurts the overall boss variety. You're not going to fight any crazy looking monster guys except for maybe a few weird looking enemies, but there's really no Ninja Team's classic crazy looking monster here. It kind of wounds the overall enjoyment of combat because you just end up fighting the same enemy archetype a lot. You'll find the enemy variety lacking too, as all the enemies can only use the same weapons your character uses, and I think maybe there's one guy with a unique weapon, and they introduce one unique enemy type later on in the game, but it's so late in the end game it really doesn't matter. Enemies drop way too much loot, and it clutters your inventory very frequently, and it's going to get annoying after a while. And you get a lot of XP as well, and you're going to probably forget about that skill tree and skill points you've been acquiring throughout your playthrough. Believe me, you're going to open your skill tree at one point and be like, wow, that's a lot of points. The skill points, outside of unlocking new abilities that actually change the way you play, they don't really do much other than add more numbers to your character. One thing I want to mention about the open world, since this is an open world game, is that they don't use it at all. Once you get to the big city, it pretty much is never used anymore, and it's kind of disappointing. The only reason you would want to go and explore the open world is to explore the open world. The game doesn't incentivize exploring it, at least not to me. At one point, all the main quests are started in the main city, and there's no point in going into the open world if you just want to do the story. Originally, I forgot to mention the open world in my original script for this review. It's just kind of forgettable. You can also customize your character at any time you want at your longhouse with zero restrictions. You can change everything about your character and even transmog your gear. Did you hear that, Dragon's Dogma? I don't have to pay money for this one. I'm sorry, Dragon's Dogma is still a good game. Gameplay can be a lot of fun when you're just doing your own thing, but if you're looking for a unique experience, you're not going to find it here. However, if you desperately need an alternative to the Assassin's Creed games, this might actually work well for you. Story. The story takes place during a very interesting time in Japan where the shogunate movement was at war with the anti-shogunate revolutionists. You play as a member of the Veiled Edge, a group of assassins trained with a partner known as a Blade Twin, and you will create not one, but two custom characters. After failing to assassinate the American Commodore Matthew C. Perry, one of your twin blades is forced to sacrifice themselves to a mysterious samurai only known as the Blue Demon. After returning home, your remaining twin blade, who is now the protagonist of the game, makes it their duty to find their partner, and in doing so, gets intertwined with the Boshin War. It's a very interesting concept that just doesn't feel like it's been executed well. There are so many characters to keep track of and so many different key moments in the game, it's almost overwhelming. Seriously, this game feels like it's going to end 3 or 5 different times before the actual ending ever comes. Voice acting here is subpar. No one really does a good job here, except for maybe Ryoma and Katsu, but not even the main protagonist sounds at all interested in being in this story. Overall, the story is not what you should buy this game for. It's not worth the price of admission, unfortunately. And just one last thing, just because I get this question a lot from friends, you know who you are. Yes, you can continue to play the open world after the credits roll. The overall, is Rise of the Ronin worth your $70? Nope, but that doesn't mean it won't be worth any amount of money in the future. I think if you find this game on sale for around $20 or $30, I would take a shot at it. You might actually really like the game. And for future projects from Team Ninja, I think if they want to do something like this again, they just need to give the game a better sense of identity. They need to figure out what works for their type of style of gameplay and their open world. You can't just make an open world and not do anything with it, which is what they kind of did here. That is why my final rating for Rise of the Ronin is going to be a 6.5 out of 10. I still think it's a decent game, and if they did more with the story and the open world, it probably would have been a 7 or 8, but they just didn't do much with it in the end. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you like what you saw here today. Let me know what you thought of Rise of the Ronin. See you all in the next video.